Alex. Welcome to the Bitcoin Source. Can we start things off by having you introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, Dadu. It's great to be here. Sure. So I'm Alex Lielacher. I run Rise Up Media, which is a Bitcoin-focused content marketing agency. So what we do is we help Bitcoin companies grow by deploying content-focused growth strategies. So we have a big focus on SEO, social media, email marketing, blog content, thought leadership pieces. So essentially anything that's written content with a strong leaning towards SEO.
Nice. Thank you for that introduction. So, I'm always curious to know this when I get guests on the show. What inspired you? What got you into Bitcoin, whether it was people, courses, or even just, conferences that you might have gone to in the past that kind of got you in as a Bitcoiner early in your earliest stages?
So my background, both education-wise and professionally, is in traditional finance. And so I studied financial and I studied investment and financial risk management at university, and I later went on to work as a trader and as a sales guy in the credit markets. And the way that I was orange-pilled was by a friend from university. After we finished university, we went to Hong Kong. Like, both of us had never been to Asia, and we thought Hong Kong would be sort of a good first place to visit. And this was back in 2011. It was in 2011, and we hadn't seen each other for a while. And then we met up in Hong Kong, spent like a week there or so. And he told me about Bitcoin. He was like, oh yeah, there's this new sort of digital money. It's only composed of code and it's already trading. And around then it was worth like $10. And he explained it to me. And I remember specifically, he told me back then, the way it's constructed with the limited supply, that it could go to 1 million. And that was back when it was trading at $10. And he got me super excited about it. And, obviously we spent time in Hong Kong, we had a lot of fun, went out partying and everything. But we did get back to talking about Bitcoin on several occasions because I was very interested. And also back then I was like, okay, I want to buy some as well. So after that trip, which was at the start of the summer, after the summer I started my first job, my first full-time job in banking after university. And I got a sign-on bonus because back then, I don't know if you still get those if you're starting in banking these days. Back then you did. And I was like, I'm just going to take £1,000 and put it into Bitcoin. But back then it was so difficult to buy Bitcoin because I basically had to use some weird, dodgy, Russian payment, online payment provider, so I could buy Bitcoin on Mt. Gox because that's what it was back then. I think it was Mt. Gox. And I ended up not doing it because it was just too much of a hassle. And I just started my career in banking and I was super focused on that. And then I sort of put it aside, but I still followed it here and there when it came up in the media. And then it was, I think, 2013 when it went up to 1,000. And then it was in financial news media because I was, sitting on the trading floor with my 8 screens. And, Bitcoin did come up in the financial media back then, especially when the price rallied. And that's really when I started following it from an investment point of view. Started following Bitcoin. And then 2014 was the first time I set up an exchange account and I started buying Bitcoin. I also bought other cryptocurrencies at the time. And from then onwards, back then it was more of an investment, and that's how I looked at it. And then after I left banking in 2015, I started, so at the end of 2015, I left banking. I started traveling the world as a digital nomad, and I started freelancing and trying different sort of online business models. And there, one of my clients was a Bitcoin online magazine. Back then, in 2016, there was 8 of them or something. It was one of the smaller ones. And they paid me in Bitcoin. And when that started, it sort of reignited my interest for Bitcoin. And at that point, I was like, I have this background in finance. I'm really enjoying, back then it was pretty much freelance writing. I wasn't doing much marketing work yet, but I was really enjoying the writing. And I was really interested in Bitcoin. And the more I learned about it, just about having money that's outside of the outside the government control that fascinated me. And the more I learned about it, the more I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. It also matches my background and my skills so nicely, because there weren't a lot of people from traditional finance working in Bitcoin back then, at least not in the media space. So I thought this could be a really good sort of, new career path for me, in a subject matter that I was really interested in and just getting more and more interested in. So yeah, that's how it started.
Beautiful. I started in Bitcoin in 2017, and I left traditional banking for myself in around 2018. So I can relate a lot to your story and your journey. The cool thing is that you kind of found out about Bitcoin super early. A lot of people had no idea what Bitcoin was in 2011, 2012. So it's really interesting to hear that story and how it kind of encapsulates your passion for Bitcoin and actually what drove you to actually start building your own, Bitcoin marketing and content company, which I think is super exciting. And, it's definitely clear that Bitcoin has proved its use case over the last decade or so, especially in these uncertain times you see with the, dissolution of some major banks in the US, people going on bank runs. So Bitcoin is definitely here to stay, I think. And I think that it's definitely going to be a hedge for inflation, like people are quickly realizing. But how does your company intertwine Bitcoin into driving more traffic, leads, and sales?
So I don't think I wouldn't say that we intertwine Bitcoin. I'd say because our clients are Bitcoin companies. So what we're doing, I would say, is we take what works in sort of traditional marketing and apply it to Bitcoin where it fits. So, for example, I think one of the reasons why I wanted to focus on content marketing. I mean, obviously, that's kind of where my expertise came from and something where I felt comfortable we could deliver. But I didn't want to be sort of like a full stack marketing company because I think the content side works really well for Bitcoin companies. So, for example, paid ads is something that most Bitcoin companies can't run because they're just not going to get ad accounts. When they do get ad accounts on, for example, Facebook or Meta, whatever it's called now, then they can't run certain ads because they have certain keywords in there that just they're not going to approve the ads, right? So, that the whole like paid ads thing is really difficult for Bitcoin companies. Even on platforms like Reddit, like there's a lot of platforms where you think you can run ads, you just can't. On the other hand, something like SEO, so, for people who don't really understand, what SEO is or don't have a marketing background, so it basically means ranking on page 1 of Google, to put it in the simplest terms. So if someone is, looking to buy Bitcoin with cash in Boston, for example, where you are, and Google's, Bitcoin ATM in Boston or buy Bitcoin with cash in Boston, and those companies that rank for those keywords on Google, they're going to get new customers. So that's the big bulk of our business is exactly that. We help our customers rank on Google for search terms that are going to drive them more customers, more growth through more website traffic. That is the main focus of what we do, and that's something that works really well. If as a Bitcoin company, say you're like a Bitcoin exchange or a Bitcoin app, where people can buy and sell Bitcoin, if you can rank for the relevant keywords on the first page of Google, you are going to get traffic. Your numbers are going to go up, especially when the price of Bitcoin goes up, because the search terms for Bitcoin and Bitcoin price are almost like have a one-to-one correlation. So if you're well positioned from an SEO point of view, you're going to do well. Social media is another thing that, as we know, works really well because all the Bitcoiners are on Twitter or now slowly moving to Nostr. But social media is another area that has traditionally worked well for Bitcoin companies. Although what I would say with that, especially with places like Twitter or even LinkedIn, if you're a Bitcoin company that's aiming to target the mass consumer is probably not going to be on Twitter. Whereas if you're a Bitcoin company that sells like Bitcoin nodes or some kind of advanced stuff that only quote unquote proper Bitcoiners would buy, then yeah, Twitter is great, social media is great, Telegram groups are great. Whereas if you're looking to hit the mainstream and onboard like no coiners and new coiners, then getting them organically through Google, for example, is going to be much more impactful. So that's something with our customers where we also look is like, who's your target audience, where do they hang out, and then match the two together.
Yeah, I can agree with that more. And just even for myself, being a freelance writer, a content writer, and writing about Bitcoin for several years at this point, I agree it is very difficult to get people to onboard into the asset and actually find these articles and these content on these search engines. And I utilize using tag words. Hashtags and tag words have been really helpful for me to pinpoint my audience and figure out exactly what the SEO is focusing on when it comes to terms like blockchain technology, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency. Actually, the word cryptocurrency gets more hits than Bitcoin does because there's just so many options with the altcoins versus just Bitcoin. And a lot of people have their aspersions about Bitcoin, but I personally think that you're right. The long-term approach, especially coming from a marketing aspect, is that you're always going to see Bitcoin continuing to grow exponentially versus some of these other altcoins. You're seeing them be hacked. You're seeing people lose money. FTX is a perfect example where in the short term, the gains are high. Everybody's making money. Everybody's promoting it from celebrities to politicians. And then when your money is lost, everybody bails out. You can't get any answers versus with Bitcoin, you are your own bank and you can always get your money out at any time because you're in control of your private keys. You have it on cold storage, and you have tons of marketing and education platforms to learn from.
I think the the big difference between Bitcoin and crypto or the altcoin markets or the shit coins, as everyone says, is that Bitcoin is sort of like slow and steady and robust and for the long term, whereas all the crypto stuff is if you're going to do that, then you have to catch it on the way up, and you have to magically sell at the top, which no one ever does. And that's the same for businesses. I mean, we get inquiries from like, I once got a inquiry from some random like gambling dApp on Tron that were interested in our services, and I was just like, no. And then I think like 6 months, or no, I didn't respond to them initially. And then 6 months later, I was like, let me just look at what this is. And then I clicked on it, and the whole thing was gone already. So I was like, yeah, like I'm not going to do business with those kind of people. That's the difference with Bitcoin companies is, they have a much more conservative approach, much like Bitcoin is more conservative. And they're building something that's supposed to last and not just to make a quick buck. Obviously, startups fail and all that, like if you time your funding wrong. But generally, like my experience working with Bitcoin companies, they're all very long-term thinking. They're not taking massive amounts of risk. It's already risky enough working in Bitcoin because it is cyclical. There's definitely, there was a dip in business for everyone when the market collapsed last year, and things are already looking a lot better this year as the price has gone up. So it is very much, the entire industry is linked to the price more than we would like it to be, especially because I don't know if most Bitcoiners, but a lot of Bitcoiners, and I'm one of them, don't really care about price that much. I think a lot of Bitcoiners really care about the long-term impact that Bitcoin can have, whether it's in the US or in Europe, where I'm from, or in the global South. I think that's what people are interested in to build on, the best possible money we can have. But yeah, the sort of the other side of it with all the crypto stuff, the Web3 stuff, it's super, that is way more cyclical, and that very much feels like people are looking to make a quick buck and get out again. A lot of people make a lot of money, that's true. Usually the people selling the tokens, obviously. But I prefer working with I specifically want to work with Bitcoin companies. That is kind of our target audience. We occasionally do work with fintech companies as well and some more sort of traditional finance companies. But the focus is definitely to work with Bitcoin companies because that's what I'm passionate about. That's who I want to work with. And that's also where I feel like as a company, we can make a lot of impact. And at the end of the day, our mission is to put Bitcoin into the hands of more people. And instead of kind of selling Bitcoin directly, like an exchange or an app, we're helping businesses like that grow their customer bases.
That's kind of the sweet spot, I think. I think that when you're looking at Bitcoin from a marketing perspective or a company perspective, there's, I want to say there's a little bit less risk, trying to be an exchange or actually dealing with leverage versus just solely trying to push that brand or service to the next level through marketing, through content creation. I think that that is what is needed in the Bitcoin ecosystem right now because there's so many distractions, there's so much misinformation, disinformation. And if you can get a company that's solely focused on Bitcoin, they want to see the price of Bitcoin go up. They want to get it into the hands of a lot of people and make it ubiquitous where when this does become, available at your local petrol shop that you can put gas in your car with Bitcoin or your grocery store, all these marketing tactics that companies have been building up over the years will actually be helpful for people because now when it becomes something that you have no choice to use or it's just so common that it becomes easier than going through a traditional bank or using fiat money, people are going to come in droves to actually learn about this and want to be a part of their, the lifestyle of Bitcoiners because it's super impactful for people to do so. And, you talk about the drawbacks of marketing, right, Alex? And from me being a writer and a freelance writer in the space, there's tons of drawbacks for, being a quote unquote Bitcoiner. Sometimes you can be, I don't want to say blackballed, but you can be kind of put into this box where people think that you're toxic or you don't have an open opinion about open source technology. And Bitcoin can't be the only one. The first things are usually never the things that end up being, the end all be all once technology continues to grow and expand. So my question to you, Alex, is, what kind of drawbacks have you faced in your company so far trying to market Bitcoin to the masses?
Sometimes you have difficulties getting business because of the image of Bitcoiners on the internet and that it's like old technology and new things will come. I think that kind of approach that kind of adversarial thinking probably comes from that sort of tech startup space mentality, where people are looking for the next best thing and they're looking to grow as fast as possible and get the next valuation, which is very much the kind of thinking that you have in the crypto Web3 space. Whereas Bitcoin is like people who understand it know that it's very likely something that's going to last. And it's also not stagnant. People are building on it. There's new innovation coming. We've seen a lot of that this year with Nosta and ordinals. So, it's not stagnant. New things are happening. It's just taking a longer time, usually. It's just a slower development. So to answer your questions regarding what hurdles we've had any pushback. When I talk to when our clients are specifically Bitcoin companies, so we don't really get much pushback because we're so focused to a specific target audience. But when I talk to non-Bitcoin companies, when I talk to fintech companies, there's definitely a bit of skepticism around Bitcoin. A lot of neobanks, for example, are very anti-Bitcoin. I understand why, because they're concerned about their banking license and concerned about pissing off regulators or their other banking partners. But that's, for example, an area where there's a lot of sort of anti-Bitcoin sentiment in the fintech space in general. This whole notion that like blockchain is really interesting, but Bitcoin is bad. It's still there to some degree, not as bad as it was a few years ago when blockchain was the big thing. Now it's Web3. I don't know how they did the rebrand. It just kind of happened. If you talk to sort of traditional finance or non-Bitcoin fintech players, you do get pushback just because Bitcoin, the thing with Bitcoin is it still has not a bad reputation, but still kind of somewhat of a branding issue because mainstream media is still going against. Like it's still running the anti-Bitcoin narratives, like that it's money for criminals, which we already know it's not because Chainalysis has done their has done their tracing and looked at what Bitcoin is really being used for, and then now it's the whole environmental thing against the miners. And we know that Bitcoin has a much higher renewable energy mix than other industries, but mainstream media is not really talking about that. So there's still Bitcoin still has a branding issue, and the only way we can combat that is through education and providing factual information out into the masses. That's the way to combat that. But as a business ourselves, we don't really get much pushback because we really operate within the Bitcoin community. It's when we do deal with companies outside of Bitcoin, it's usually through referrals, through people that have worked with me. So they will give me the time of the day. I definitely had meetings where I would show up the same way I'm on the podcast now, with like a Bitcoin T-shirt and my tattoos out and my long hair, and there would be some finance guy sitting there in his suits, and the initial impression is like, who's this guy? But once I start talking about my background in banking and kind of explaining what we do and how we're going to get them from A to B, how we're going to get them to reach their marketing goals, the conversations usually go very positively. So yeah, Bitcoin still has a branding issue, but for us, it's not much of a problem because we really work within the Bitcoin industry.
And the more that you attack Bitcoin, the stronger it gets. And it was super interesting. I saw like an old picture of you when you were a banker, and then we seen this like crazy transformation, like the long hair. It's almost like, like you turned into like Conan, or Bitcoin Conan. And, I just love to see that because it just shows people that how Bitcoin allows you to actually become more of your true self, right? What you really are passionate about, who you truly want to be. And I think there's a lot of people in the banking industry that might be curious about Bitcoin or even know a lot about Bitcoin, but they're kind of being compressed into not really talking about it or being open about it just because of the particular industry that they're in right now. And I just love the fact that your company is doing a lot of the marketing and content creation or SEO creation for companies that really need it. And I think a lot of companies might not publicly say that they're being helped with their marketing efforts on the back end, but I think that's what the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that there is no HR department. There's no CEO. You can't go and complain to somebody about Bitcoin. So from the branding aspect, when you look at something like Coca-Cola that's been around for pretty much a century now at this point, they've had so many decades to work on their branding, their themes, put themselves in commercials, on advertising billboards. And Bitcoin is kind of people doing this off the muscle. No one is, there's no budget for Bitcoin. You just do it because you're passionate about it. And I think that your company is a perfect example of that for sure, Alex.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, Bitcoin's branding and marketing department is you and me and all the other Bitcoiners out there. And it's up to us to just educate, basically talk to anyone who's willing to listen, maybe not talk to people who don't want to hear about it because there's enough people who really don't care about Bitcoin. But to anyone who's interested, which in my experience is most people, because a lot of people have heard of Bitcoin but don't really understand what it is. I think it's up to us to go and talk to people and explain to them what it is, how it works, send people their first Satoshis, clear up any of the misconceptions. I think that's important. But then, of course, at a larger scale, Bitcoin companies need to go out just to make sort of the orange pilling more scalable. Bitcoin companies need to go and talk to like the big mass media houses and bring their messages across and basically explain like, yes, Bitcoin is an inflation hedge. Bitcoin mining, is helping the development of new renewable energy sources. Bitcoin is able to act as a store of value in countries where the currencies are getting crushed. These kind of narratives, like we also need to go out, and Bitcoin companies need to go out and tell these stories, make sure that it gets out on a much larger scale. And that's also something that we're helping with our work.
We obviously know that you're a Bitcoiner, you understand the protocol, you've been doing this for a number of years, but from a CEO or founder perspective, when you're onboarding an employee, do you want them to be well-versed in Bitcoin? Like, for example, there's the C4 consortium. I never know if you never heard of that, but they have like Bitcoin certifications or proof that the person that you're working with or the companies that you're working with truly know about Bitcoin. So do you have like any prerequisites for people coming into your company or even working with people? Because I think a lot of people jump on Bitcoin because it's trendy, but sometimes they really don't know what Bitcoin is truly about. And I think that could impact you as a marketer and content creator when you're trying to work with a client.
That's a great question. We're currently in the process of hiring more people. And it's 100% a prerequisite that anyone we hire now needs to have at least I say at least 3 years of experience working in Bitcoin. Ideally longer, also depends on the role. But so, for example, when we're hiring freelance writers, which is the bulk of the people that we work with, like they need to have several years of experience. It can't just be like you said, someone who's like, oh, this is a place where I can make money, or someone who like picks a niche, how it often is in like the internet marketing world. No, it needs to be someone who has experience. They don't need to be they don't need to spend every day on Bitcoin Twitter and be like hardcore Bitcoiners and bash Ethereum all day or anything like that. But they need to have industry experience. They need to know what they're talking about, and also like it doesn't need to be their number one passion, but they need to have a certain passion for it as well. I think I've been quite fortunate that some people in the team who were new to Bitcoin when they joined, they just, the more they learned about it, the more interested they got, and the more questions they asked me. And I do make sure that the people I work with go to meetups in the area. And we also make people, we ask people to do the Michael Saylor's Bitcoin course. That's a good one. It's quite long and in depth, but that's a good one to do. And I think it's important. Like in this industry, it's actually that is something that's a challenge for Bitcoin companies in general. Is when they want to hire people, ideally they want to hire Bitcoiners. They don't want to hire people who are good at the job but have no clue about Bitcoin. They want to hire Bitcoiners, but there aren't that many Bitcoiners out there. Like people that have really been in the industry for like 4 or 5 years that really like know their stuff. And a big thing of what we do and where we come in and where we help companies is that we speak Bitcoin. That's what I like to say. Because I've been around for so long, and several of the team members have been in the industry for a long time. So when it comes to like writing social content for a Bitcoin company, it's very different than writing social content for like a banking app, for example. The language is completely different. Of course, it also depends whether you want to attract mainstream users or more like hardcore Bitcoiners. But generally, like you need to know what you can say, what you can't say. You need to know how to say it. So we only hire people who are experienced, and we also make sure that people who aren't as deep into the subject matter, that they continue to educate themselves. And for example, with the Michael Saylor course, like once people have completed the course, we pay them. Like I'm a big believer in incentivized learning. So same that with new writers that come on, if they haven't already, we ask them to do the HubSpot content marketing course. It's like a free 6-hour course, which essentially teaches you best practices for writing for the internet. It's a really good course. And same thing, we pay people to take the course. Like I think that's fair to pay people for the time. So 100%. If it's possible, working in the Bitcoin industry, you want to hire Bitcoiners. It's just not always that easy. But yeah, it's the ideal scenario.
Thank you for that transparency, Alex. I think that is super important. And I think a lot of people will be more incentivized to work for companies such as the one that you're currently running, where if they know that they don't know much about Bitcoin, but they can actually get paid to learn about it, I think that will open the doors for a lot of people to come in and really try to like onboard into learning what Bitcoin is. And Alex, this conversation has been incredible. I learned so much about marketing, content, your company, you as a Bitcoiner. Before we go, can you give people your social media handles and any future endeavors that you want the audience to know about?
Yeah, sure. So you can tweet at me at Alex Lielacher. So that's at AlexLielacher. My company is called Rise Up Media. You can find us under riseup.media. I think Twitter is the best place to hit me up.
Once again, thank you, Alex, for being on the Bitcoin Source, a Bitcoin conversation. Have a good one.
Thanks. It was a pleasure to be here.